Emma Wilson, a radiant black woman, 7 months pregnant, pulses with hope in New Orleans' misty outskirts. In a supermarket lot at dawn, her dreams are gutted when Brian Carter, a sadistic, racist cop, unleashes hell. His savage kick to her pregnant belly leaves Emma bleeding, battling for her life and her unborn child. The city erupts in rage, and Ethan, her ex-Special Forces husband, becomes a one-man wrecking crew, hunting justice through a cesspool of corruption. This isn't just an attack, it's a war on a rotten system. Will their unyielding fight shatter the lies, or will it annihilate them? Where you watching from? Comment below. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale golden glow across the sparse, quiet outskirts of New Orleans. The parking lot of a small weathered supermarket stood nearly empty, surrounded by scattered houses half hidden in the morning mist. The air was still heavy with the promise of a new day. But for Emma Wilson, a 7-month pregnant black woman, this serene morning was about to shatter into a nightmare. Emma stepped out of the supermarket, her arms cradling a paper bag filled with groceries, fresh apples, a loaf of bread and milk for the week ahead. Her breath puffed in the chilly air, and she adjusted her scarf. Her thoughts drifting to the nursery she and her husband Ethan were preparing for their unborn child. The lot was quiet, save for the distant hum of a delivery truck and the occasional chirp of waking birds. Only a handful of early shoppers lingered, their footsteps soft on the cracked asphalt. Without warning, the screech of tires sliced through the silence. A police cruiser, its blue and white paint glinting under the rising sun, roared into the lot and jerked to a stop mere feet from Emma. Her heart skipped as she froze, clutching her groceries tighter. The driver's door swung open, and Officer Brian Carter stepped out, his boots hitting the pavement with a deliberate thud. A white, middle-aged cop with a reputation that sent chills through the community, Brian was known for his cruelty, his badge a shield for unchecked power. His neatly cropped hair and cold, piercing eyes gave him an air of menace, and the smirk curling his lips promised trouble. "Hey, you, Brian," barked his voice sharp enough to cut through the morning calm. "What do you think you're doing here?" His hand rested on the holster at his hip, fingers twitching near his gun. Emma's pulse quickened, but she steadied herself, her voice soft yet firm. "I just finished shopping, officer," she said, lifting her bag slightly as proof. "I'm heading home." Brian's eyes narrowed, scanning her with undisguised contempt. "Don't lie to me," he snapped, taking a step closer. "I know your type, sneaking around, stealing from stores like this." His words dripped with venom, laced with the kind of prejudice that had haunted this community for years. Emma's stomach tightened, not just from fear, but from the weight of his accusation, a lie rooted in the color of her skin. "I didn't steal anything," she replied, her tone steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I have my receipt right here." She reached for her purse, but Brian's hand shot up, stopping her. "Keep your hands where I can see them." He roared, his face reddening. The few passers-by, a tired delivery man, an elderly woman with a cart, paused, their eyes darting nervously. No one spoke, but their fear hung heavy in the air. Emma's breath hitched as she felt her baby kick, a reminder of the life she carried, now caught in this escalating nightmare. Brian closed the distance between them, his boots scraping the asphalt. "You people always think you can get away with it." He sneered, his voice low and menacing. Before Emma could respond, he lashed out, his fist slamming into her shoulder with a sickening force. She stumbled, gasping, her groceries slipping as she struggled to stay upright. Pain radiated from her shoulder, but she clutched her belly instinctively, protecting the child within. "Please," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I'm 7 months pregnant. I didn't do anything wrong." Her words seemed to ignite something in Brian. His face twisted with rage, and without warning, he drew back his leg and delivered a brutal kick to her stomach. The impact was like a thunderclap, sharp and unforgiving. Emma screamed a raw, piercing cry that echoed across the lot as she crumpled to the ground. Apples rolled from her bag, scattering like fallen dreams, and her hands clawed at the pavement, shielding her belly as pain consumed her. The sparse crowd gasped, frozen in shock. A delivery man, his face pale, fumbled for his phone, hands trembling as he began recording. An elderly woman clutched her cart, whispering, "Oh Lord, no." But it was a middle-aged man unloading his own groceries nearby who found his voice. "She's pregnant, you monster," he shouted, stepping forward, his fists clenched. Brian whirled on him, his hand now gripping the gun at his hip. "Back off," Brian snarled, his eyes wild with defiance. "You want to be next." The man hesitated, his courage faltering under Brian's threat, but his phone stayed raised, capturing every moment. The other bystanders, too, afraid to intervene, kept their distance, their cameras rolling as Emma's sobs filled the air. Brian's smirk returned cold and triumphant as he loomed over her, daring anyone to challenge his authority. Emma curled into herself, her breath ragged, each gasp laced with agony. Her hands pressed against her stomach, feeling for her baby's movements, praying they were still there. The mist seemed to thicken around her, the world blurring as tears streamed down her face. She wasn't just fighting for herself. Now she was fighting for the life inside her, a life that Brian's cruelty had endangered in an instant. The parking lot, so quiet moments before, now buzzed with tension. The bystanders' videos, shaky but damning, were already uploading to social media, their timestamps marking the dawn of a reckoning. Brian, oblivious to the digital storm brewing, straightened his uniform and strode back to his cruiser, his boots echoing with arrogance. He cast one last glance at Emma, still crumpled on the ground, and muttered, "You brought this on yourself." But he was wrong. This wasn't just an attack on Emma, it was an assault on justice itself. The bystanders, though silenced by fear, held the truth in their hands. Their recordings, raw and unfiltered, were about to ignite a fire that Brian could never extinguish. Emma's pain, captured in those fleeting moments, would become a rallying cry, a call to arms for a community long oppressed. As the sun climbed higher, its light cutting through the mist, the reality of Brian's actions settled over the lot. Emma's cries softened, but her resolve hardened. She wasn't just a victim. She was a mother, a fighter, a spark, and that spark was about to set New Orleans ablaze. A single kick in the dawn's light could destroy a family, but could it also ignite a battle against injustice? When Emma's cries spread through viral videos, her husband, Ethan, was thrust into a storm of rage. The air inside the New Orleans shipping plant was thick with the clang of metal and the drone of machinery. Forklifts rumbled across the concrete floor, their engines snarling as workers shouted over the din. Ethan Wilson, a broad-shouldered former Special Forces soldier, stood at his station, sweat beading on his brow. His calloused hands maneuvered crates with practiced ease, but his mind was elsewhere on Emma, his wife, and the baby they were expecting. The morning shift was grueling, but Ethan's thoughts were anchored to the quiet moments they'd shared planning their future, a future that felt within reach. His phone buzzed in his pocket, sharp and insistent. Ethan ignored it at first, focused on stacking a pallet, but the vibration persisted, cutting through the factory's chaos. Wiping his hands on his work apron, he fished out the phone. The caller ID showed Jake an old friend from the neighborhood. Ethan's gut tightened. Jake never called during work hours. "Ethan, it's bad." Jake's voice cracked through the line barely audible over the plant's roar. "Emma, she's been hurt. Some cop attacked her at the supermarket. She's at St. Mary's Hospital now." The words hit like a grenade detonating Ethan's calm. His vision blurred, the phone slipping slightly in his grip. "What do you mean? Attacked?" he demanded, his voice low but edged with steel. Jake's rushed explanation, Emma pregnant, beaten by a cop, sent a surge of adrenaline through Ethan's veins. He didn't wait for more. "I'm coming," he said, cutting the call and ripping off his apron. The foreman shouted after him, but Ethan was already sprinting toward his truck, the world narrowing to a singular purpose: get to Emma. The drive to St. Mary's was a blur of red lights and blaring horns. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as he weaved through traffic, his heart pounding like a war drum. Memories of his Special Forces days, missions, and chaos lives on the line flashed through his mind, but this was different. This wasn't a battlefield halfway across the world. This was Emma, his anchor, his home. The thought of her in pain, their unborn child at risk, twisted his insides into knots. He screeched into the hospital parking lot, tires squealing against the pavement. The emergency room was a maelstrom of activity. Beeping monitors, hurried footsteps, and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Ethan pushed through the glass doors, his boots thudding on the linoleum floor. "Emma Wilson!" He barked at the receptionist, his voice hoarse. "Where is she?" The nurse pointed him toward the ICU, her expression grim. Ethan's legs carried him down the sterile corridor, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. He rounded a corner and stopped dead. Through a glass window, he saw her Emma lying motionless on a hospital bed, her face pale as ash. Tubes snaked from her arms and a monitor blinked with her faint heartbeat. The sight stole his breath, a fist of grief and rage slamming into his chest. A young nurse, her badge reading Clara, approached cautiously. "Mr. Wilson. She's stable for now, but it's touch and go. The trauma. It's severe, especially with her pregnancy." Her voice softened, but what she said next ignited a fire in Ethan's soul. "The officer who did this. Brian Carter, he's done things like this before. Everyone knows, but no one stops him." Ethan's jaw clenched, his fists balling at his sides. Brian Carter. The name seared into his mind, a target painted in blood. He stepped into Emma's room, the beeping monitors a cruel reminder of her fragility. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. He sank into a chair beside her, taking her hand gently, as if she might shatter. Her fingers felt cold, delicate, and the weight of his failure to protect her crushed him. "Emma," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm here. I'm so sorry." His thumb traced circles on her hand, a silent vow to make this right. But how his Special Forces training screamed for action. Find Carter, make him pay. He could almost feel the weight of a rifle in his hands, the clarity of a mission. But this wasn't a war zone. This was his wife, his unborn child, and a system that let men like Carter walk free. The urge to hunt Carter down battled with the need to be strategic, to fight smarter, not harder. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against her hand. "I swear, Emma, he won't get away with this." His voice trembled with a mix of fury and fear. What if she didn't wake up? What if their baby? He couldn't finish the thought. The nurse's words echoed. Carter had done this before. A predator in a badge, shielded by a corrupt system. Ethan's training kicked in, his mind sharpening. Vengeance wouldn't be enough. He needed justice, the kind that tore down walls of power. Clara re-entered, checking Emma's chart. "She's fighting. she said softly. "The baby's heartbeat is still there, but it's weak. We're doing everything we can." Ethan knotted his throat too tight to speak. He looked at Emma's face, her strength etched even in unconsciousness. She'd always been his rock, the one who grounded him after years of war. Now she needed him to be hers. He stood, pacing the small room, his boots scuffing the floor. The hospital's chaos faded into the background as his mind raced. Carter's name, his history. The nurse's warning, they were pieces of a puzzle. Ethan had dismantled criminal networks overseas, tracked enemies through jungles and deserts. This was different, but not impossible. He could find Carter's weaknesses, expose him, make him pay. But the cost, Emma's life, their child's hung over him like a guillotine. The door creaked, and a doctor stepped in his face, weary. "Mr. Wilson, we've stabilized her for now, but the next few hours are critical. She's strong, but the trauma was severe." Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving Emma. The doctor's words were a lifeline, but they didn't erase the image of her crumpled in that parking lot alone against a monster. Ethan sank back into the chair, his hand reclaiming hers. He could feel the storm building inside him, a tempest of rage and resolve. Carter had crossed a line, and Ethan's past had taught him one truth: no one was untouchable. But as he sat there watching Emma fight for life, he knew this wasn't just about him. It was about her, their baby, and every soul crushed by men like Carter. He would fight, but not with fists alone. This was a war of wits, and he was ready to wage it. Would Ethan let his rage lead him, or would he sharpen his pain into a weapon for justice? When Ethan grappled with his emotions, a tidal wave of outrage on social media erupted, opening a door for him to act. The digital world buzzed with fury, a virtual inferno sparked by a single video. Across smartphones and laptops, screens glowed with the grainy footage of Officer Brian Carter's brutal attack on Emma Wilson, now shared thousands of times. In New Orleans, the streets pulsed with unrest as protesters spilled onto sidewalks, their signs scrawled with demands for justice. The city's humid air carried the chants of angry voices mingling with the honk of horns and the shuffle of marching feet. Social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, became battlegrounds where truth and lies collided in a storm that refused to die down. By mid-morning, the hashtag #Justice for Emma had climbed to the top of global trends. Posts flooded X, each one a raw cry of outrage. A user named Anola Truth shared the video with a caption, "This is Officer Brian Carter. This isn't his first time." Attached were screenshots of old news articles detailing complaints against Carter, assaults, harassment, all swept under the rug. The comments exploded. "How is this man still a cop? This is why we don't trust them." The digital tide was relentless, each share amplifying Emma's pain into a clarion call for change. But not everyone stood with her. A shadowy group of accounts, suspiciously coordinated, began pushing a different narrative. She was stealing, one post claimed, no evidence provided. Emma Wilson provoked him. Another insisted linking to a blurry photo of Emma holding her grocery bag twisted to look suspicious. These lies spread like wildfire, fanned by Carter's allies who knew how to manipulate the algorithm. The online clash was vicious supporters of Emma traded barbs with anonymous trolls, each side digging in. Was Carter a rogue cop, or was the system itself the real villain? A pivotal moment came when a witness from the parking lot, a delivery driver named Marcus, posted his own video. His footage, clearer than the others, showed Emma's calm demeanor and Carter's unprovoked rage. "She did nothing but try to go home," Marcus wrote, his words cutting through the noise. "This cop's a bully, and they've let him run wild for years." His post went viral, racking up millions of views in hours. It was a gut punch to Carter's defenders, reigniting the hashtag and drowning out their lies. Protesters, emboldened, gathered outside City Hall, their voices a chorus of defiance. Carter, unfazed by the growing storm, agreed to a local TV interview that evening. The studio lights glared, casting his smug face in sharp relief. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said, leaning back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his lips. "People are blowing it out of proportion. I was doing my job, keeping the streets safe." His words were gasoline on a fire. Viewers flooded X with reactions: "Safe. He almost killed her. This is why we're protesting." The anchor, visibly uncomfortable, pressed him on the video, but Carter waved it off. Edited footage, he scoffed, his arrogance a slap to every viewer. The backlash was immediate. In New Orleans' French Quarter, a flash protest erupted, young activists leading a march through cobblestone streets. They held phones aloft, streaming live to thousands. A college student, her voice hoarse from chanting, spoke to a reporter. "This isn't just about Emma. It's about all of us who've been targeted, silenced, hurt." Her words, shared across platforms, struck a chord, pulling in support from across the country. Celebrities retweeted our justice for Emma, and national news outlets picked up the story, their headlines screaming, "Pregnant woman attacked by a cop. Where's the justice?" Yet the online war wasn't one-sided. Carter's supporters, some genuine others, bots, doubled down. A post from an account called Oh Law and Order 22 claimed, "Cops like Carter are heroes." You don't know the whole story. It gained traction among those eager to defend the badge no matter the cost. The debate raged. Some saw Carter as a symptom of a broken system, others as a scapegoat for a mob. The truth, raw and undeniable in Marcus's video, fought to stay afloat amidst the noise. In a quiet corner of the city, a group of local activists gathered in a community center, their laptops open, strategizing. Among them was Lena, a fiery organizer with a knack for rallying crowds. "We can't let them bury this," she said, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Emma's story is our story. We keep pushing until Carter's done." They drafted petitions, planned vigils, and shared every piece of evidence they could find. Their posts, tagged with "Justice for Emma," kept the pressure on refusing to let the city or Carter look away. The streets outside grew louder, protesters' signs bobbing in the fading light. No justice. No peace. They chanted, their voices carrying through the humid dusk. A news van parked nearby, its camera capturing the crowd's resolve. Lena stepped outside, addressing the growing throng. "This isn't just one cop," she shouted, her voice steady. "It's a system that lets him hurt people like Emma and walk free. We're not stopping." The crowd roared their unity, a force Carter couldn't ignore. The digital and physical worlds were now intertwined, each feeding the other's momentum. Emma, still lying in her hospital bed, was unaware of the fire her pain had ignited. But the city was awake, its pulse quickening with every share, every chant. Carter's smug dismissal on TV had only poured fuel on the flames, and the truth captured in shaky phone footage was proven stronger than his lies. The question lingered heavy and urgent. Could this outcry topple a man shielded by power, or would it fizzle under the weight of deception? Would this digital uprising have the strength to bring down a powerful abuser, or would lies snuff it out? The public's fury spurred Ethan to harness his military skills, launching a calculated war. The hospital room was a cocoon of dim light, the soft hum of monitors weaving a fragile thread of hope. Emma lay still, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths, the sterile glow of fluorescent lights casting shadows across her face. Ethan Wilson sat by her side, his chair creaking under his weight, eyes locked on her pale features. The chaos of the outside world, the viral videos, the swelling protests felt distant here, drowned by the steady beat of Emma's heartbeat. But Ethan's mind was a battlefield, torn between the man who wanted to hold his wife and the soldier who craved action. He stood, pacing the small room, his boots scuffing the linoleum. The rage that had surged when he first saw Emma in this bed hadn't faded. It had sharpened, honed by hours of watching her fight for life. But rage alone wouldn't bring down Brian Carter. Ethan's years in Special Forces had taught him that battles were won with precision, not passion. He needed a plan, a strategy to dismantle the man who'd hurt his family and the system that shielded him. Ethan moved to the corner of the room, where a small table held his laptop and a scattering of notes. This was no longer just a hospital room, it was his command center. He opened his laptop, the screen's glow harsh against the muted light. His fingers hesitated, then began typing, pulling up public records on Carter. The search was slow at first, but soon a pattern emerged. 7 complaints filed against the officer over 5 years, each one dismissed with vague notes about insufficient evidence. Ethan's jaw tightened. 7 lives brushed aside like dust. He dug deeper, his training kicking in, methodical, relentless. A name popped up in an old report, a young black man beaten during a traffic stop, his complaint buried. Ethan's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. Carter was a predator, and someone or something was protecting him. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples, the weight of the discovery pressing against his chest. He could storm the precinct, confront Carter himself, but that would be a suicide mission. No, he needed allies' evidence, a way to expose the rot without losing everything. His phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a call from Marcus Reed, a former squad mate turned lawyer. Ethan answered, his voice low. "Marcus, I need your help." The line crackled with urgency as Marcus listened, his tone grave. "Carter's got a history, Ethan. I've heard whispers, evidence, tampering witnesses intimidated. I'll dig into my contacts, see what I can pull." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "There's something else," Marcus added, his voice dropping. "I found a report buried deep about a woman Carter roughed up 2 years ago. Same M.O., accused her of a crime, then attacked. It's like he picks his targets." Ethan's blood ran cold. The report wasn't just a clue, it was a map to Carter's cruelty. He thanked Marcus, his mind racing. If Carter was tampering with evidence, there had to be a trail. Ethan opened another tab, searching for court records, police logs, anything that could confirm Marcus's tip. Hours passed, the hospital room growing darker as dawn gave way to day. Emma stirred once, her hand twitching, and Ethan paused to brush a strand of hair from her face. "We're going to get him," he whispered, his voice a promise. The deeper Ethan dug, the clearer the picture became. Carter wasn't just a bad cop, he was a symptom of a diseased system. The dismissed complaints, the tampered evidence, the silence of those who should have acted at all pointed to a network of protection. Ethan's Special Forces instincts flared. He'd taken down warlords and cartels, tracked their movements through chaos. This was no different. Carter was the target, but the system was the enemy. He pulled an old notebook from his bag, its pages worn from years in conflict zones. Flipping it open, he began sketching a plan. Gather evidence, amplify public pressure, build a coalition. His pen moved with purpose, listing names, journalists, activists, old military contacts who owed him favors. One name stood out: Sarah Klein, a reporter known for exposing corruption. Ethan shot her a message attaching Marcus's report. "This is bigger than one cop," he wrote. "Help me blow it open." Sarah replied, "Within minutes I'm in. Send me everything you've got." Ethan felt a spark of hope, but it was tempered by doubt. Could he take on a system this entrenched? His training said yes, every enemy had a weakness. But the cost weighed heavy. If he pushed too hard, Carter's allies might retaliate, and Emma was still vulnerable lying in this bed fighting for their child. He glanced at her, her face calm in sleep. The sight steeled him. This wasn't just about vengeance, it was about ensuring no one else suffered like she had. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up more records, cross-referencing dates and names. Each click was a step toward justice, each note a weapon in his arsenal. He wasn't the grieving husband now. He was the soldier calculating precise, ready to strike. The hospital room, once a place of despair, pulsed with purpose. Ethan's laptop screen glowed with documents, his notebook filled with strategies. He wasn't fighting alone anymore. The public's outrage was a force he could harness, but only if he played it smart. Carter thought he was untouchable, but Ethan had dismantled bigger threats before. This time the stakes were personal, and that made him dangerous. Could Ethan wield his sharp mind to topple Carter, or was the system too powerful to break? As his dossier on Carter grew, a young officer faced a crisis of conscience, opening the door to an unexpected ally. The New Orleans police precinct hummed with tension, a pressure cooker of fluorescent lights and stale coffee. The air was thick-heavy with the scent of ink and sweat as officers shuffled through reports and radios crackled with static. Lucas Hayes, a young black officer barely a year into the job, stood at his desk, his uniform crisp but his heart uneasy. At 24, he'd joined the force with dreams of making a difference, inspired by his mother's stories of justice and courage. But today, those dreams felt like ash tainted by the man he'd once admired, Officer Brian Carter. Lucas had looked up to Carter, the veteran cop who seemed to command respect with every step. But that respect had crumbled days ago on a quiet street in the 9th Ward. Lucas had been on patrol with Carter when they stopped an elderly man, his hands trembling as he fumbled for his license. The man's only crime was a broken taillight, but Carter's eyes gleamed with malice. Without warning, he'd shoved the old man against the car, his baton cracking against frail shoulders. "You think you can disrespect me?" Carter had snarled, his blows relentless as the man cried out defenseless. Lucas had frozen his voice, caught in his throat, shame burning his chest. He'd wanted to intervene, but fear of Carter of the badge kept him silent. Now, in the precinct's suffocating bustle, Lucas couldn't shake the image. Carter's cruelty wasn't new. Whispers of his violence echoed through the department, but no one spoke up. The precinct's walls seemed to pulse with secrets, and Lucas felt their weight pressing down. He glanced at Carter across the room, laughing with another officer, his arrogance untouched by the growing storm outside. The Justice for Emma hashtag was everywhere now, a digital wildfire Lucas couldn't ignore. He'd seen the video, seen Emma collapse under Carter's boot, and it had gutted him. She could have been his sister, his mother. Lucas slipped out during his break, driving to his cramped apartment in Treem. The place was a mess. Empty takeout containers, a flickering lamp casting shadows on peeling paint. He sank onto the sagging couch, staring at a framed photo of his mother. Her warm smile, a stark contrast to the chaos in his mind. She'd raised him alone, working double shifts as a nurse, always preaching one truth. Justice isn't given, Lucas. You fight for it. Her words, once a comfort, now felt like a challenge he wasn't sure he could meet. He pulled a folder from his bag stolen from the precinct's archives. Inside were documents, incident reports, complaints against Carter, all marked closed despite damning details. A woman harassed at a bus stop. A teenager roughed up for suspicious behavior. Each case buried signed off by higher-ups who looked the other way. Lucas's hand shook as he read his mother's voice echoing, "Do what's right, even when it's hard." He knew what he had to do, but the cost was staggering: his career, his safety, maybe his life. Ethan Wilson's name had surfaced online tied to Emma's fight. Lucas had found his contact through a mutual friend, a risky move that could end everything. He typed a message on a burner phone, his fingers hesitant. "I have proof Carter's been protected. Meet me tomorrow, midnight, Crescent Park." He hit send, his heart pounding. This was treason in the eyes of his colleagues, a betrayal of the Blue Wall, but staying silent felt like a greater sin. Back at the precinct, the air grew heavier. Lucas was filing paperwork when Officer Daniels, a grizzled veteran loyal to Carter, leaned in close. "Heard you've been asking questions, Hayes," he said, his voice low, eyes cold. "You don't want to be on the wrong side of this. Carter's got friends, powerful ones. Keep your head down, or you'll regret it." The threat hung like a blade, sharp and real. Lucas nodded, his face blank, but inside his resolve hardened. Daniel's warning wasn't just about Carter. It was about a system that crushed anyone who dared to speak out. That night, in his apartment, Lucas sat in the dark, the lamp's faint glow illuminating his mother's photo. He traced her face with his thumb, memories flooding back, her teaching him to stand tall, to never bow to fear. Carter's actions weren't just wrong. They were a violation of everything Lucas had sworn to uphold. He opened the folder again, flipping through pages that could end his career. One document stood out, a memo from a sergeant instructing that a complaint against Carter be handled quietly. It was proof, a crack in the system's armor. Lucas's phone buzzed a reply from Ethan. "I'll be there. Bring everything." The decision was made. He was crossing a line, becoming a traitor to some, a hero to others. His hand steadied as he gathered the documents, tucking them into a hidden compartment in his bag. The precinct's walls, the threats, the weight of his badge, they couldn't stop him now. He was fighting for Emma, for the old man, for his mother's legacy. But fear lingered, a shadow, whispering that Carter's allies wouldn't let this go unpunished. The clock ticked toward midnight, each second a step toward rebellion. Lucas stood, slipping the burner phone into his pocket. He glanced at his mother's photo one last time, her smile a beacon in the dark. "I'm doing this for you," he whispered, his voice steady. He wasn't just a cop anymore. He was a man choosing justice over loyalty, truth over silence. Would Lucas's courage shatter the wall of silence, or would he pay the ultimate price? His documents gave Ethan an edge, but Carter's ferocious backlash heightened the danger. The streets of New Orleans were cloaked in darkness, their shadows long and jagged under flickering streetlights. The humid night air clung to the skin, heavy with the threat of rain. Ethan Wilson navigated the city's back roads, his truck's engine a low growl as he headed home from the hospital. The city felt different now, hostile, alive with unseen dangers. Every alley seemed to hide a threat, every passing car a potential enemy. The weight of his mission to expose Brian Carter pressed harder with each passing hour, and the documents Lucas had promised were a lifeline he couldn't afford to lose. At home, Ethan's small shotgun house was a fortress of clutter papers strewn across the kitchen table, his laptop humming with open tabs. He locked the door behind him, the deadbolts click, a small comfort. But peace was fleeting. His phone lit up with a notification from X, a post from an account called Blue Line Pride. Ethan Wilson, ex-soldier turned troublemaker, is no hero. Ask about his dishonorable discharge. The words were a punch, a lie spun to discredit him. Ethan's military record was spotless, but the smear spread fast, racking up retweets from faceless accounts. Carter was fighting back, and he wasn't playing fair. The next evening, Ethan stood watch outside Emma's hospital room, his eyes scanning the corridor. The antiseptic smell burned his nostrils, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow. Nurses hurried past, their footsteps echoing, but Ethan's focus was razor-sharp. He'd noticed a man lingering near the hospital entrance earlier, a tall figure in a hooded jacket, his face obscured. Ethan's instincts, honed by years in combat, screamed danger. He'd memorized the man's gait, the way his hands stayed buried in his pockets. Carter was desperate, and desperate men sent others to do their dirty work. His phone vibrated, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Ethan answered, his voice steady. "Who is this?" A distorted voice rasped through the line, cold and deliberate. "Back off, Wilson, or your wife won't make it through the week." The call cut off, leaving Ethan's heart hammering. He gripped the phone, his knuckles whitening. The threat wasn't just words, it was a promise, and Emma, still fragile in her hospital bed, was the target. He glanced through the glass at her sleeping form, her hand resting protectively over her belly. The sight fueled his resolve, but fear gnawed at him. He couldn't lose her. Across town, Lucas Hayes was navigating his own peril. Inside the precinct, the air was thick with suspicion. He stood at a filing cabinet pretending to sort reports, but his ears were tuned to a conversation nearby. Carter's voice, low and venomous, drifted from a corner office. "Those papers better disappear," he hissed to another officer. "If Wilson gets them, we're all screwed." Lucas's pulse spiked. The documents he'd copied, the ones proving Carter's cover-ups, were hidden in his apartment, but Carter's words confirmed they were a target. Lucas slipped out, his heart racing, and stashed the files in a new hiding spot, a locked box under his floorboards. He couldn't let Carter destroy the truth. That night, Ethan drove home through deserted streets, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. A black SUV appeared behind him, its headlights glaring. It stayed close, too close, matching his every turn. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel, his training kicking in. He took a sharp left, then a right, weaving through narrow roads. The SUV followed, its engine roaring as it closed the gap. On a lonely stretch near the bayou, it surged forward, its bumper grazing Ethan's truck. The impact jolted him, tires screeching as he fought to keep control. His heart pounded, adrenaline flooding his veins. This wasn't an accident, it was an attack. Ethan floored the gas, his truck lurching forward. The SUV gave chase, its headlights blinding in the mirror. He swerved onto a side street, the vehicle skidding but staying on his tail. In a split-second decision, he slammed the brakes, pulling over. The SUV screeched past, its driver obscured in the dark. Ethan memorized the license plate, his breath ragged. He knew Carter was behind this, maybe not in the driver's seat, but pulling the strings. The officer's desperation was clear, his empire crumbling under the weight of public outrage and Ethan's growing evidence. Back home, Ethan bolted the door, his hands shaking as he dialed Lucas. "They're coming for us," he said, his voice low. "I got a call and someone tried to run me off the road." Lucas's reply was tense. "I overheard Carter. He's planning to torch the evidence. I've hidden it, but we need to move fast." Ethan nodded, though Lucas couldn't see. The threats were escalating, but so was his determination. Carter's attacks weren't just a defense. They were a confession of guilt, proof that Ethan was hitting a nerve. He sat at the kitchen table staring at the papers scattered before him. Each document, each complaint was a piece of Carter's downfall. But the cost was mounting. Emma's safety, Lucas's career, his own life all hung in the balance. Ethan's military instincts urged him to strike back, to confront Carter head-on, but his love for Emma demanded caution. He couldn't risk her life for revenge. The smear campaign and the phone call, the chase, they were meant to scare him off, but they only sharpened his focus. Carter was unraveling, and Ethan would use that against him. The night stretched on the city's hum, a distant echo. Ethan checked his phone, seeing new posts under vows justice for Emma, the public's anger a growing tide. He wasn't alone in this fight, but the threats were personal now, aimed at the heart of his family. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, and closed his eyes. Emma's face, pale but fierce, filled his mind. This was for her, for their child, for every soul Carter had broken. He would fight, not with fists, but with the truth. Would Carter's brutal tactics crush the truth, or only make Ethan stronger? As the threats intensified, a sudden health crisis for Emma forced Ethan to reassess his priorities. The intensive care unit at St. Mary's Hospital was a sterile fortress, its walls echoing with the relentless beep of monitors. The air was heavy thick with the scent of disinfectant and the weight of unspoken fears. Machines hummed their screens, flashing numbers that held life in the balance. Emma Wilson lay at the center of this clinical storm, her body fragile under crisp white sheets, her face etched with exhaustion. Ethan Wilson stood by her side, his broad frame, hunched eyes fixed on her every breath. The threats from Carter, the chase through dark streets, still burned in his mind, but here in this room they felt like distant thunder compared to the storm brewing within. It was late evening, the hospital quiet, save for the rhythmic pulse of machinery. Ethan's hands rested on the bed's railing, his fingers gripping the cold metal as if anchoring him to reality. He'd been running on adrenaline, piecing together evidence, dodging Carter's attacks, but now exhaustion clawed at him. He hadn't slept in days, his focus split between protecting Emma and dismantling Carter's empire. But as he watched her so still, so vulnerable, a gnawing guilt took root. He'd been fighting for her, but had he been there for her? A sharp gasp broke the silence. Emma's eyes fluttered open, her hands clutching her swollen belly. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice ragged, laced with pain. "Something's wrong." Her face contorted a wince, twisting her features as she curled inward. Ethan's heart lurched, his soldier's calm shattered. "Nurse," he shouted, his voice cracking as he hit the call button repeatedly. The door swung open, and a nurse, her badge reading Lila, rushed in, followed by Dr. Patel, his face taut with urgency. "She's in severe pain," Lila said, checking the monitors as Emma's breathing grew labored. Dr. Patel's hands moved swiftly, assessing her vitals. "We need to get her to the OR now," he ordered, his tone clipped. "Possible placental abruption. The baby's in distress." Ethan's world tilted, the words slicing through him like shrapnel. He grabbed Emma's hand, his voice trembling. "You're going to be okay. Both of you." But his eyes betrayed his fear, wide and searching as nurses wheeled her bed toward the operating room. The corridor was a blur of white walls and hurried footsteps. Ethan followed until a nurse stopped him at the OR doors. "You need to wait here, Mr. Wilson," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Ethan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The doors swung shut, leaving him alone in the hallway, the beeping monitors replaced by an oppressive silence. He sank against the wall, sliding to the floor, his head in his hands. The weight of everything, Carter's threats, the smeared lies, the near miss on the road crashed over him. But nothing compared to this. Losing Emma, losing their child was a wound he couldn't survive. He closed his eyes, praying something he hadn't done since his days in combat. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking, "don't take them from me." Memories flooded in Emma's laugh, her hand in his as they painted the nursery, her quiet strength through every hardship. He'd been so consumed by his fight, by the evidence piling up at home, that he'd neglected the one thing that mattered most, being here fully for her. Guilt twisted like a knife, sharp and unrelenting. Hours crawled by, each second an eternity. Ethan paced his boots, scuffing the linoleum, his mind replaying every moment he could have done more. He should have been at the supermarket, should have protected her. The thought of Carter's smirk, his boot connecting with Emma's body, sent a fresh wave of rage through him. But, as he paced, a deeper truth emerged. His fight wasn't just for vengeance, it was for Emma's survival, for their child's future, for a world where no one else would suffer like this. The OR doors finally opened, and Dr. Patel emerged, his expression weary but steady. "She's stable," he said, and Ethan exhaled a shuddering breath of relief. "The baby's heartbeat is stronger now, but Emma needs complete rest. No stress, no visitors for a while." Ethan nodded, his voice hoarse. "Can I see her?" The doctor gestured toward the room, and Ethan hurried inside, his heart still racing. Emma was awake, her eyes heavy but fierce. She reached for him, her hand trembling. Ethan knelt beside her, pressing her fingers to his lips. "I'm here," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emma's gaze held his unwavering despite her pain. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Fight for us, not just for me, for everyone he's hurt." Her words were a spark reigniting the fire in him. She wasn't just a victim, she was a warrior, and her strength shamed his doubts. He nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "I will," he promised, his voice steady now. Emma's words were a call to action, a reminder that this fight was bigger than their pain. He'd been chasing justice, but he'd let it pull him away from her. No more. He would fight smarter, harder, but he'd do it with her at his side in spirit, if not in body. The guilt still lingered, but it fueled him now, a reminder of what was at stake. Ethan kissed her forehead, lingering for a moment. The monitor's steady beep, a fragile promise. He stood his shoulders, squaring his resolve, hardening. Carter's threats were real, but so was Emma's courage. She'd face death and come back fighting, and Ethan would honor that by balancing his role as a husband with his mission as a soldier. The war against Carter wasn't over. It was just beginning. Would Ethan choose to protect his family, or press on with a fight that could cost him everything? Emma's strength inspired her to step into the battle with a new role. The hospital room was a sanctuary of quiet, its dim light softening the harsh edges of the world outside. Emma Wilson lay propped against pillows, her face pale but resolute, the monitor's steady rhythm a testament to her survival. The sterile air carried the faint hum of life, but Emma's spirit burned brighter than ever. Ethan sat beside her, his hand clasped in hers, still shaken by her brush with death. Her whispered words, "Fight for us," echoed in his mind, a call that had rekindled his purpose. But today, Emma was no longer just the heart of their fight. She was ready to lead it. Despite her weakened state, Emma's eyes gleamed with defiance. "I'm done being silent," she said, her voice soft but unyielding. Ethan's brow furrowed concern, etching his face. "You're still recovering," he protested, but Emma shook her head, her jaw set. "This isn't just about me, Ethan. It's about everyone they've hurt. I need to speak." Her determination was a force unshakable, and Ethan could only nod, awed by her strength. She reached out to Lena, the activist who'd rallied protests across New Orleans. Together, they planned a press conference right here in the hospital's small chapel, a space of solace turned stage. By noon, the room was packed. Cameras lined the walls, reporters scribbled notes, and community members stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces a mix of hope and anger. Emma sat in a wheelchair, her hands folded over her belly, her presence commanding despite her fragility. Ethan stood behind her, protective, his heart swelling with pride. The cameras rolled, streaming live to thousands. Emma leaned forward, her voice steady, cutting through the room's tension. "My pain is not just mine," she said, her words clear, resonant. "It's the pain of every person targeted, silenced, broken by those meant to protect us. We won't stay quiet anymore." The crowd erupted their cheers, a wave of solidarity. Reporters' questions came fast, their voices overlapping, but Emma answered with grace, her story raw and unfiltered. "I was buying groceries for my family," she said, her voice catching. "I was no threat. But he saw my skin, my pregnancy, and chose violence." The broadcast lit up social media. Justice for Emma surging again. Posts poured in calling her a hero, a voice for the voiceless. But the victory was short-lived. Within hours, a new video surfaced, posted by an account linked to Carter's allies. It was a distorted clip from the supermarket, edited to show Emma reaching into her bag, framed as if she were stealing. The caption read, "She provoked him. Don't fall for the lies." Comments flooded in vicious and unrelenting, "She's playing the victim." Cops don't attack for no reason. The online assault was a knife to the heart, twisting Emma's truth into a weapon against her. Ethan watched the posts multiply, his fists clenching. "They're lying," he growled, but Emma's hand on his arm steadied him. "Let them talk," she said, her voice calm but fierce. "The truth is louder." Her resolve was a beacon guiding them through the storm. Lena, standing nearby, was already mobilizing. "We'll counter this," she vowed, typing furiously on her phone. "The community's with you, Emma." And they were. By evening, a mural appeared on a Ninth Ward wall, Emma's face radiant with the words "Justice for All" in bold letters. Vigils sprang up across the city, candles flickering in the dusk, each flame a testament to her impact. The online backlash didn't stop. Troll accounts likely tied to Carter's circle hurled insults, questioning Emma's character, her motives. One post, shared thousands of times, called her a danger to law enforcement. But for every attack, supporters fought back. A local pastor tweeted, "Emma Wilson is our sister, our strength. Her voice is our voice." A teenager posted a video tearfully recounting her own run-in with Carter, her story echoing Emma's. The digital battle raged, but Emma's words had ignited something unstoppable, a movement that refused to be silenced. In the chapel, as the press conference ended, a reporter asked, "What do you want?" "Mrs. Wilson," Emma's answer was simple, searing. "I want accountability. I want change. I want no one else to feel this pain." The room fell silent, her words hanging heavy, a challenge to the city, to the system. Ethan watched, his chest tight with awe. She was no longer just his wife, she was a symbol, a force daring him to match her courage. He'd been fighting for her, but now she was fighting for herself, for their child, for countless others. Outside, the city responded. Protesters gathered in a public square, their numbers swelling as news of Emma's speech spread. Signs bore her name, her image, her words. Lena led a chant, her voice rising over the crowd. No more silence, no more pain. The square pulsed with energy, a sea of faces united by Emma's stand. A young artist, spray paint in hand, added to the mural, her brushstrokes bold, defiant. Emma's story was no longer just hers. It belonged to New Orleans, to every soul who'd faced injustice and refused to break. Back in the hospital, Emma rested, her strength spent, but her spirit unbroken. Ethan sat beside her, his hand in hers, marveling at her power. She'd turned her pain into a rallying cry, but the fight was far from over. Carter's lies were a desperate attempt to cling to power, but they only proved how far he'd fallen. Emma's voice had shaken the city's foundations, and Ethan knew he had to carry her fire forward to confront the man who'd tried to destroy them. Would Emma's words unite the city or be drowned by lies? Her courage drove Ethan to confront Brian Carter head-on at the precinct. The New Orleans Police Precinct loomed like a fortress, its brick walls steeped in secrets and the hum of authority. Inside the conference room was a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights amplifying the unease. Rows of chairs held senior officers, their faces stern badges glinting under the harsh glow. Ethan Wilson stood at the front, his posture rigid, a man forged in battle now facing a different kind of war. In his hands, a folder brimmed with evidence, documents, videos, truths that could shatter the room's fragile order. The weight of Emma's courage, her voice still ringing from the hospital chapel, fueled his every step. Brian Carter sat across the table, his smirk, barely concealed eyes glinting with defiance. He leaned back, arms crossed as if untouchable, his uniform crisp, despite the storm swirling around him. Lucas Hayes lingered at the room's edge, his young face, taut fingers twitching with the weight of his choice. The precinct's brass, Captain Reynolds, a grizzled veteran and internal affairs officer. Torres watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. A lawyer, Sarah Klein's contact, stood by Ethan, her briefcase a quiet promise of legal firepower. Ethan's voice cut through the room, steady, commanding. "This ends today," he said, his eyes locked on Carter. He opened the folder, spreading its contents across the table, grainy stills from the supermarket video witness statements and Lucas's stolen documents. "Brian Carter has abused his power for years," Ethan declared, his tone unwavering. "He attacked my wife Emma while she was 7 months pregnant. But she wasn't his first victim." He slid a report forward detailing a brutalized teenager, a case buried by the department. Murmurs rippled through the room, officers shifting uncomfortably. Carter's smirk faltered, but he leaned forward, his voice dripping with scorn. "This is a witch hunt." He spat his finger, jabbing at Ethan. "You're a disgraced soldier spinning lies to tear me down." His words were a calculated jab, echoing the online smears, but Ethan didn't flinch. He played a video on a laptop, Marcus's footage from the parking lot, Emma's cries piercing the silence. The room stilled, faces paling as Carter's boot connected with her body. "This isn't a lie," Ethan said, his voice low, lethal. "This is the truth you've hidden." Captain Reynolds leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "These are serious accusations, Wilson. You'd better have more than a video." Ethan nodded, sliding another document across the table, a memo signed by a sergeant, instructing that complaints against Carter be dismissed. 7 cases, Ethan said, his voice rising. 7 lives ruined, and your department covered it up. The lawyer, Ms. Harper, stepped in, her tone sharp. "We have affidavits from victims corroborating evidence and a pattern of misconduct. Carter's actions are indefensible." Carter's face reddened, his fists slamming the table. "This is a conspiracy," he roared, standing so fast his chair scraped back. "You've got nothing but forged papers and a vendetta." His outburst was a crack in his armor, desperation seeping through. Ethan held his gaze unflinching, but the room's tension spiked when Lucas stepped forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "He's lying," Lucas said, his eyes meeting Captain Reynolds's. "I've seen Carter's violence firsthand. I took those documents from the archives. They're real." The room erupted in gasps, officers exchanging stunned glances. Lucas, the rookie who'd idolized Carter, was now his betrayer. Carter's eyes widened, betrayal flashing across his face. "You little rat," he snarled, lunging toward Lucas, but Torres grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Sit down, Carter," she ordered, her voice ice. Lucas continued his words steady, despite the fear in his eyes. "I saw him beat an old man for no reason. I heard him order evidence destroyed. He's not just one bad cop, he's protected by this department." The silence that followed was deafening. Captain Reynolds' face hardened, his fingers drumming the table. Torres flipped through the documents, her expression darkening with each page. Ethan pressed his advantage, his voice cutting through the quiet. "You've let this man terrorize our city for years. Emma almost died. Others weren't so lucky. How many more have to suffer before you act?" His words were a challenge, a demand for accountability that hung heavy in the air. Carter's composure shattered. "You can't prove anything," he shouted, but his voice cracked, his arrogance crumbling. Torres stood, her badge catching the light as she signaled to two officers at the door. "Brian Carter, you're under arrest for assault and misconduct," she said, her tone final. The room froze as handcuffs clicked around Carter's wrists, his face a mask of shock and rage. He struggled briefly, spitting curses, but the officers dragged him out, his protests echoing down the hall. Ethan stood tall, his heart pounding, a mix of triumph and exhaustion washing over him. Lucas met his eyes, a silent nod passing between them. The senior officers sat in stunned silence, their authority shaken. Ms. Harper gathered her papers, her voice low. "This is just the start, Ethan. The department's complicity runs deep." Ethan nodded, his mind already racing. Carter's arrest was a victory, but it was only the first battle in a larger war. The room emptied, officers filing out, their whispers a low hum. Ethan lingered, the weight of the moment settling in. Emma's voice, her strength had carried him here. He'd faced Carter not as a soldier, but as a husband, a protector of her legacy. The precinct, once a symbol of untouchable power, now felt fragile, its cracks exposed. But Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. Carter's allies were still out there, and the system they served was far from broken. Would Ethan's evidence be enough to bring Carter down, or would the system shield him? Carter's arrest sparked a federal investigation, but a personal tragedy shook Ethan's resolve. The federal courthouse in New Orleans buzzed with frenetic energy, its marble halls echoing with the clamor of reporters packing a press room. Ethan Wilson stood at the back, his face etched with resolve as federal prosecutor Daniel Armstrong took the podium. The evidence Ethan and Lucas had uncovered, documents, videos, memos, had sparked a federal probe peeling back layers of corruption in the police department. Armstrong's voice boomed, detailing a network of bribes and falsified reports that had shielded Brian Carter for years. Officers, once loyal to Carter, turned on him, spilling secrets to save themselves. A leaked audio surfaced, Carter's voice admitting to tampering with evidence, but he sneered, "I'm just a pawn in their game." His words exposed a deeper rot, but Ethan feared retaliation from those still hidden in the shadows. Would this web of corruption collapse, or merely shift its targets? As the investigation widened, devastating news about Emma's health reshaped the Wilsons' perspective. In the hospital's quiet exam room, the air was heavy, the dim light casting long shadows. Emma sat her hands clasped tightly as Dr. Patel delivered a crushing blow. The trauma from Carter's attack had left her unable to conceive again, shattering their dream of a larger family. Ethan's heart sank, guilt clawing at him for failing to protect her. Emma's eyes glistened, but she gripped his hand, her voice steady. "Make this pain mean something," she said, her words a spark of purpose. Their shared grief became a vow to use the city's settlement money to build a center for victims of police violence. The loss was raw, but their resolve transformed it into hope. Could Emma's pain ignite lasting change, or would it overwhelm them? Their sorrow birthed the Justice and Equality Center, a beacon of hope. The city park glowed with vibrant banners, the crowd buzzing with anticipation at the center's opening. Emma, cradle and baby Justice, stepped to the microphone, her voice clear. "Pain doesn't define us, purpose does." Her speech, a call for unity, electrified the crowd, but a heckler echoing Carter's lies tried to disrupt. The crowd drowned him out, chanting in solidarity, their voices a wall against deceit. The ribbon cutting marked a triumph, the center a lifeline for survivors. Emma's strength had turned tragedy into action, but lingering doubts remained. Would her center become a flag of justice or be hindered by the past? As the center shone, Carter's confession revealed a darker truth, strengthening the Wilsons' mission. In a stark prison cell, Brian Carter sat defeated, his once proud uniform replaced by drab gray. His confession to ties with organized crime triggered a citywide probe exposing the system's underbelly. He spoke of lost ideals consumed by greed, a shadow of the man he'd been. Across town in the Wilsons' warm home, Emma and Ethan held baby Justice, named for their fight. The community rallied their chant "Justice for all," ringing through the streets, a testament to resilience. Carter's downfall was complete, but the Wilsons' legacy endured, a center empowering victims, proving unity could conquer injustice. Their story closed with a powerful lesson: love and perseverance could transform pain into hope for all. Could the Wilsons' victory reshape the system, or was it just a fleeting spark? Their story ended leaving a message that love and resilience could turn sorrow into hope for a community. And so the Wilsons' fight became a beacon, a testament to what courage and unity can achieve. From a brutal dawn in a quiet parking lot to the vibrant opening of the Justice and Equality Center, Emma and Ethan turned their pain into purpose, proving that even the deepest wounds can spark change. Their story isn't just theirs, it's a call to every heart that yearns for fairness, a reminder that no system is too big to challenge when we stand together. Baby Justice, cradled in their arms, carries the name of a battle won, not just for one family, but for a community that refused to be silenced. What would you do if injustice struck someone you loved? Would you fight like Emma and Ethan to turn pain into hope? If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with others, and subscribe to join us for more tales of resilience and triumph.